now see that we are recording it, and that way you can all access it later on when we start to um, to review this, or when you want to access it in your own time. And I will give you a link of how to access this recording. So essentially, the difference between Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud's approach was that Sigmund Freud took very different sources of information, your childhood history, your sexual history, your problems, and reduce it to one small focal point. And the focal point was usually sexual, some kind of a sexual problem, which was going to cause your difficulties. While Jung's approach was totally different. He took one problem and he opened it up to look at its healing potential. What is your symptom trying to tell you? For example, if you have a heart problem, then what your illness is telling you is that you have a problem in your heart region, but also a problem in your heart chakra, or relationship issues in Kundalini Yoga, meaning you are not open to your emotionality, your relationship, your mutuality. And when you make a connection with that part, then your heart problems start to improve. And that is what you probably all have seen in your own treatment of patients with heart problems, that when they start becoming relational, when they start becoming connected with people they love, they start to make an improvement in the heart symptoms, and of course in their relationships as well. So this is called a potential approach, teleologic approach, to take a problem and to project it outwards into its fullest potential, rather than to just stay focused on the symptom itself. So that is called a teleologic approach to treatment. Let me just check in if everyone is still connected here. Let's see, webcam enabled for participants and so forth. Okay. So if you have difficulty tracking me or hearing me, please just raise your voice, or just type it down there in the chat section, and I can see what you're saying. Good. I see a note that Bosco can also hear me. Yes, Bosco, looks like you can hear me too now. Excellent. Now we have to look at, in his lifetime, Carl Jung evolved several theories which are all important for treatment of psychiatric problems and addictions particularly. And I will, over the next several meetings, explore each of these in great detail with you, so you will all have a working knowledge of these basic theories of Jung and how they apply in clinical practice. So that is the goal of our next few presentations. So in his lifetime, he actually had 5 or 6 theories, and all of them are like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, like a symphony. There is a piano, there is a violin, there is drums, there are compression instruments, percussion instruments. All of them create the symphony of treatment and healing. And I think a basic understanding of each of these basic components of Jungian theory is helpful in building our treatment paradigm. So the first thing he worked on was a theory of complexes. Later on, he enlarged that on theory of archetypes, because and I will explain to you in simple kind of context what this means. The third thing he was very curious about was psychological types, because each one of us has a different psychological typology, and when we understand our own typology and the typology of our patients, we can be much more effective in a more comprehensive treatment, particularly with addicts. The next is he talked about alchemy, which is a agnostic or an old tradition of making gold out of lead. Now, of course, these people had some chemical success, but really much more than chemical success, this alchemist created a science of how to project their unconscious process onto the process of making gold. In other words, how to take the lead of our personality, the lower aspects of our personality, and transform them rather, into the gold of our potential. So the real value of alchemy is not gold making, but soul making. So I think it's a very, very important model. And alchemy, an understanding of alchemy, how substances react with each other, are a model, a framework, a paradigm of how individuals deal with each other, particularly with significant relationships, with parents, with spouses, with siblings, with important people in their life. And when we understand what is their alchemic model of relationship, then we can impact it. For example, earlier today, I saw a woman who is a manic depressive woman, very fine soul, very creative, very intelligent, very beautiful woman, but she is a person who is willing to take risks in life, and in most part that is very helpful. Anyone can, if you can hear me, can someone respond? Or let's see if you can speak, and so if I can hear. Yeah, if someone can speak on a mic and tell me, if you are dealing with fire, what is the antidote to fire? I'm just checking also the mic and see if it mic works. Uh, Water, yes, of course, water. So alchemically, if the personality is one of fire, uh, then the antidote to that is water. And since what is a symbol of water in psychology? When you are in the water, you are in the unconscious. In other words, you are depressed, you go down, you go inside. So the only way nature could balance this person's fire energy, the manic energy, was to pull her down into the waters of the unconscious and depress her. And when she was depressed, when she is depressed, she's much more thoughtful, she's much more calm, she's much more reasonable, she's much more connected to her authentic self. So the only way nature has healed her so far is by antidoting her water energy, her fire energy with water energy or depression. So her depression is the most healing thing that can happen in her life. Also, she's very creative, so she's like air, full of energy and drive and intuition and new ideas. So, what is the antidote to air? Uh, Mr. Sani, Dr. Sani, you can type it. Yes, good, good. So the antidote to air is earth. So what does earth mean psychologically? Earth means a person with ground, with structure, with commitment, with stickability. So chemically with earth energy to provide a sense of structure, focus, commitment, stick to itiveness to the goal she has in her life. So I think we have agreed to her, she and I, that she will not move anywhere else now for next 2 3 years, or till a few years till all her children are done with school, and she will not keep changing jobs every 12 months, even just because a new or better job comes along. And I think so that is the whole idea of alchemy. It's very, very fascinating. And the last thing that Jung, and I will discuss all of these in a little more detail, but I just wanted to give you an example. And the next thing that Jung talked about in his last 20 years of his life was the whole theory of individuation, which is how to take the opposites in your personality and bring them into balance or union. So complexio oppositorium, bring the opposites in your personality and bring them into a sense of continuum or wholeness. Like our patient, to balance her fire with water and her air with earth. So all these elements in her personality had to be balanced. These opposites had to be united in a meaningful whole, and only then mental health and recovery can be established. So if you start thinking about it in these ways, you clearly can see that you are able to do much more justice, comprehensive justice to your patient's story. So now moving to each of these theories in a little more place. And of course, the most important thing that both these researchers talked about was the use of dreams. Now today I will not discuss dreams because that is a whole new subject and a very important one for treatment of addiction and depression and psychiatric problems. So we'll pick that up as a separate presentation. And the two psychologists had a very different theory of how to attend to the dreams, and they can be helpful. So today I will not talk about that. Now, how does this process begin? How do people get into this whole idea of healing? I think I should probably not talk about the dream of three holy fathers. Do some of you remember the discussion of this dream in my presentation with Mumbai group? Yes. If
Yes.
not, just raise your hands who have not heard this story of three fathers dream that I had in my Mumbai presentation. Yeah. So you have one group has not heard, the other group has heard. Uh, so Kripa Vasai group has heard this dream of three fathers. Yes.
No, no,
No.
no.
Okay. So some of you have heard it. So I will. Let's see. 1 minute. I think Bosco is trying to get in on this. I will see. Okay. So let me take a minute to discuss this dream and see how people get into this individuation process and healing from their problems, addiction, depression, midlife transition. As you know, I'm in Milwaukee and I have been here for last 35 years. And when I came here, I was, of course, like every immigrant doctor, I rose through the ranks. I fought to kind of make myself, establish myself and rise through the ranks, and was quite successful. I'm still quite successful, but in different ways. At that time, I became the director of a private psychiatric hospital in Milwaukee. Actually, Father Joe is going to be presenting something there on October 19th, and we're going to be hosting him. So it's still part of my paradigm, but I'm not politically active. I'm now more of a teacher and a mentor to doctors and staff there. So after 10 or 15 years of this leadership position, I got sort of tired and burnt out with having to be in politics and insurance hassles and trying to create business for the hospital and so forth. So I resigned my position and retreated to doing just private practice psychotherapy work with my patients one-to-one, which I truly enjoy, and I'm so glad I made that change. But for a while, I was feeling very sad about losing this special, powerful position. I had politically powerful position, and was feeling this sense of loss about this position. So in that setting, I had a dream one night after I gave up this power position. In the dream, I was back in my hometown of Ahmedabad, and I was at my college, St. Xavier's College in Ahmedabad, and I was at the college cafeteria at a table in the cafeteria. I was sitting on one side of this table, and on the other side were my three teachers, mentors, Father Wallace, Father D'Souza, and and I think there was Father Essegira. There were three fathers, but I clearly remember Father D'Souza and Father Wallace in the middle, and Father Essegira was on the other side, three of them. And we quietly had a cup of tea and maybe a sandwich, and there was not much spoken. And after that, I went to the college chapel with Father Wallace, and we both prayed, and that was the end of the dream. It was a very simple dream, and I felt very good about this dream the next morning. And my first interpretation of this dream was that as I was feeling alone and exiled in America, uh, away from my homeland and away from my ground and my culture, in this rather faraway land, uh, I was feeling like an orphan, and I was feeling abandoned and somewhat victimized because I'd given up this power position. And in that setting, I thought my three mentor fathers came to support me and cheerlead me and guide me to say that you are alone, but we are with you. So that was very reassuring. Then I continued, this dream would not go away, it continued to hold some energy for me several months down the line. So I revisited this dream again. And of course, my second thought was that not only did my three mentor fathers from my Jesuit college came to support me in my dark hour, but they came with the highest blessings of the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So it felt like a double blessing. Not only did my mentors appear, they brought with them the blessings of the Holy Trinity. So I felt doubly blessed. And the energy continued to deepen, and I felt more and more grounded on solid ground, on earth energy. But it still continued to stay with me, this dream, till I visited Mumbai and, of course, this Elephanta caves. And then I realized that not only had Father Wallace and Father D'Souza and Father Essegira appeared in my dream, but along with them came the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And along with them, the highest of the Hindu Trinity appeared as well, the Shiva, the Vishnu, and Brahma. with their consorts. So that is my land truly reached out to me to support me in every way I can understand. And I no more felt alone and exiled. So this was a very healing dream. Of course, later on in my practice, I learned after 5 years, 10 years later, that all these three fathers, these Shiva, the Vishnu and Brahma, they cannot do much without help of their consorts, Saraswati, Lakshmi and Parvati, because the God energy is a structure, while the feminine is the power, the force, the Shakti behind it. So then I wrote a book, Awaken the Slumbering Goddess, to look at the corresponding feminine archetypes that feed these gods. So in some ways, this would be the archetype of three holy fathers that came to guide me in my darkest hour. So dreams are very important and they can help you. Jung and Freud don't both play tremendous emphasis on their dreams in their life. So now we talked about complexes, and I promised I will give you at least an initial introduction on complexes. So before we get into complexes and I tell you the information about complexes and what it means, I just want to double check everyone's still okay and hear me moderately well. Yes? Dr. Shani's group can, Kripa Visai Kurp, Bosco's group can hear me too, raising hand somewhere there. Bosco 2 group, can you raise hand? Okay, good. So looks like every group can hear me. That's wonderful. Thank you. So let me now get into the whole theory of complexes, and this will be very useful to all of you in interviewing and treating of your patient, because it's the first encounter when you have with your patient. This thing is the most important thing, and I'll tell you how this will work for you. The way it started was when Carl Jung was working in a mental hospital in Zurich called the Bergholzi Hospital in Zurich. He was very curious about the different patients, bipolar patients, manic depressive patients, addict patients, obsessive compulsive, all different psychiatric categories of patients. So he was very interested in see if there's any way to diagnose them with some other methods other than just talking to them, because he was a scientist. He wanted some other method. So what he did was he constructed what we call a word association test. And in word association test, you give a series of words, usually 100 words, and you give these words to the patient, and you see what is their response to these words. So for example, if I say day, what would one of you say?
Night.
Night.
Night. All right, let me adjust my speaker volume so I can hear you. 1 second. All right, okay, this will be good. All right, so if I say day, what will you say?
Night. Night.
Night, excellent. And if I say rose, what will your response be?
Red.
Red, okay, excellent. And if I say water?
Fire. Fire.
Fire, okay, so all the opposite. So these are common responses people got, and he was hoping that actually I can hear you better now that I've turned on my speaker volume. I'm glad we are learning about each other's system here better. And you can all hear me now, so I'm very, very pleased. Bosco, has the group from Nagaland joined us? Yes? Is the Nagaland group joined us? Yes, I can hear you speak. Okay. Well, I can't hear you. I see you have raised your hand, but I don't know how to get you going.
I'm calling them up right now.
Okay, I can hear you now. Okay. So okay, let's continue with the complex indicator. So basically, the question that he was raising is, will schizophrenics have a different response system compared to, say, manic depressive or obsessive compulsive? And what he found was that in spite of thousands of tests given to many patients, thousands or plus patients over some time, there was no diagnostic response paradigm. In other words, the schizophrenics did not respond differently than bipolar. You could not, but what he found something very, very interesting, that when patients were given a stimulus word like rose or whatever, he found that sometimes patients had longer than average reaction time. In other words, when he stumbled onto a area of patient's life that was a problem for the patient, there was a what he calls a complex activation. Suddenly something happened. Patient responded in slightly different way, and when that happened, Jung knew that you are running into a area of conflict or a problem for the patient. So if you ask this patient who is in denial of alcoholism, you say, do you drink excessively? He will go into a complex. He will go into denial of some kind. So how do you know? And immediately you know that there is a problem here. So how do you know that this patient is in a denial complex? So here are the 11 complex indicators that Jung found, which give you a sense that your patient is now in a what is called the danger zone or a problem zone of their life. And these are the 11 things that patients respond in these 11 different ways that are on your board, which indicate that the patient is now. So when you are talking to your patient and they give one of these 11 kinds of responses in response to a certain inquiry or a certain question, you immediately know that this is the area of problem for your patient. Very, very important. Actually, FBI or Secret Service Department, they use this to interrogate and question the prisoners, because then they can find out if someone is lying. They go into these complex indicators. So here are the 11 complex indicators. If the response time is longer than average reaction time, so if out of 100 words, 99 they respond in 2 seconds, but in a problem question, they will respond in 7 or 8 seconds, you immediately know that this is a problem. So, for example, when you ask politicians questions, you love your country, they of course say yes, because they all may probably do love their country. And if you ask them, have you, what do you think of this problem? Then suddenly they don't respond immediately, or they scratch their head, or they respond in some, and you immediately know this person is now going to lie or make some story up. So it's very, very interesting. Or if you ask a husband, do you ever cheat on your wife? Then if it is one of these 11 responses, you know that he probably is having an affair. So here are the 11 things. Longer than average reaction time, or repetition of the stimulus word. So you will say, what, affair, doctor? No, no affair. So immediately you know that this is a person who's having an affair. Or you misunderstood your stimulus word. I say, do you have an affair with your neighbor's wife? Now what did you say? So immediately they misunderstand your stimulus word. You mean, did I go to the fair with my son? So you know this person is lying and he's definitely having an affair. Or they make some expressive movements such as laughing or scratching their head or doing something nervous. That is a telltale sign. Or they will adjust their shirt or do something which is not usual for them at the time. So immediately you know that this person is going to be going in a complex or is going to lie. Or
Doctor,
more than one word. So your test is to say only one word response. You say, "Are you having an affair?" He will say no. But if he is actually having an affair, he'll say, "Affair? No, no, doctor, never. That is not me." So there's like a long sentence. Clearly, this man is having an affair, or reacting in a striking manner with a striking gesture of some kind, which they don't normally use when they're talking, responding to the other words. So immediately you know that this person is talking about or having some kind of affair. Or they give some meaningless or nonsensical affair. So you ask them, have you an affair? They say, well, the rains are not, first there were no rains in India, now there's too much rain. So they give some nonsensical response. They change the subject, in other words. Or they go quiet, they don't respond at all. They say, affair, are you having an affair? They will just look away in the space like they did not hear you till you ask them again. Or they repeat the same word in response to the next stimulus word. So they say, no, no affair. And then you ask them, Rose, no, no. No affair. So that means they're still thinking about it. So means they are most likely either having an affair or thinking actively of having an affair. Or they slip of tongue. They talk about something else or accidentally say affair. Yes, yes. I'm dealing with affairs in my work affairs. So they'll try to change the subject or use a foreign word. They will say, "Are you having an affair?" They say, "Ishq mein mera kaam nahi." So they will speak in Hindi or Urdu instead of English. Or if you're talking in Hindi, they will start responding in English. So immediately you know that this person, this is an area of conflict for your patient. So those are some of the things that you have to look at complex indicators. So when you're talking to your patient, it's important to remember these 11 complex indicators and see if around specific topics, this may not be in response to a specific word like in word association test, but in response to specific topics. If your patient responds in these characteristic ways which are indicative of complexes or speed bumps in your patient's psyche, then you know that this patient is having a problem in this particular part of their psyche. Anyone has any question about this?
Then to connect Bosco.
Speak loudly, yes. I will make the volume loud. Go ahead.
Bosco, Dr. Ashok Bedi, in a microphone, allow Bosco there.
Get the mic closer. I can't hear you. I can hear you saying something, but I can't get it.
You know,
Bosco also do it from his side. You just click on that thing and go. What I did was,
see, hello.
Yes, go ahead. Uh-huh.
The problem is your mic, not
I couldn't quite hear all of you. Do you want to type down the question? Oh, give you the mic. Okay.
Doctor.
Uh,
Bosco has a problem in his mic again. Hello.
I can hear you.
No, Bosco has some problem with his mic. He says that you have to allow him. You have to change your settings with him.
Okay, sure. But I have allowed him. Everyone has been allowed to use the mic.
Okay, then there's some technical problem.
Yeah, because I can hear you now well, right now.
Thank you.
So why don't you give your mic to Bosco?
No, I'm in a different place altogether.
Yeah, I can hear you now. What did you say?
We are in a different place. No, we are in a different location. We are in Vasai.
Vasai, okay? But people in Vasai can't hear me, or you can hear me, yes?
We can hear you in Vasai.
Okay. All right. Well, the question, no one has any question. Okay, then let's keep moving. Or you can type out the question if you can't speak, communicate properly with mic. No? Okay. Let's keep moving. Uh, so this is the whole idea of complexes, and I think it is a very useful observational and assessment method. And the whole art of psychotherapy in Jungian approach is to identify the complexes of the patient and then help them work through them. And we will, of course, deepen these ideas in next couple of lectures. Yeah. The second is the archetypes, because you hear this term often in Jungian thought. What are the archetypes and what are they all about? So archetype is, let me give you an image and then it will give you some idea about the archetype. Can you all see this image? Yeah?
Yes.
All right. Now can you see the pretty woman in the image? Yes?
Yes.
Everyone who can see the pretty woman can raise their hand. Yes. Yeah. So most of you can see the pretty woman. Can you see this eyelashes and nose and chin? Yeah? Yes, you can now. Everyone can see the pretty woman, right? Now, will you all, if you were single and this woman was available to marry or date, if you are allowed to marry or date by a tradition, will you potentially consider her as a partner? Raise your hands if you consider this lovely young lady as a partner. Yes, most of you might be okay with her, yeah? Someone has any major problem with this young lady? No. All right, now look at this same woman again, carefully. You saw this woman with this nose, right? Can you see my pointer also? No. But if you look at the same, if you see this woman again, you can see that just under the fur is her chin. Not up there, above, but under the. Can you see the old woman in there? Can anyone see the old lady? Yes or no? Look carefully.
Yeah, you
Who
can
can see the old hag
no,
in this image?
very old. She looks like a young girl.
Who hasn't seen the old hag yet? Raise your hand. You can't see the old woman?
Yeah, we can see the old woman.
Can you also see the young woman?
Yeah, the big nose. See the big nose of the old woman and the chin into the fur.
That's her nose.
Chin.
Old woman. But if you don't look at that, then
Then you see the young girl with the pug nose.
and eyelashes.
Like
So you can see both, yes? Young woman and old woman. Anyone any problem seeing both?
My name is Tolu.
a
You can't see the
Old woman.
The eyelashes.
the young woman's heart. Well, that makes sense.
sister.
So this is a very good example of archetype.
You can see the young woman.
And I'll explain what I mean.
Old woman.
That in this image is both a very pretty young woman and a very hag old woman.
Actually with the black hair. Right?
What we see,
Then that you think of a whale or something.
yeah, everyone can see that now? Good. So this image proves that there is no absolute reality.
Yeah, but it's okay. Let them start.
Yes. Bosco, go ahead. What were you saying? All right. So there is no absolute reality. What we see depends on our mindset. If you are caught in the archetype of love or eros, then you will see a pretty young woman because you are tuned to seeing the pretty woman. But if you are older and you're caught in the archetype of aging,
Lady, no.
or crown as they call it, you will see the old hag. So the beauty or wisdom or age is in the eye of the beholder. So if you're caught in the archetype of eros or love, then you only see a very pretty woman. But if you are caught in the archetype of death or archetype of aging or archetype of disease or depression, then you will see the old hag. You see, suddenly you will see this the other side of the same image. So that is called the archetypes. Archetypes are our mindset, our personal myth, our developmental state spiritually, which determines what we see in a given reality. So if you are, for example, I came with a group of Westerners to India. I come every year in January for my study tour, and then I, of course, try to come to Mumbai and have a wonderful time with Kripa staff and Father Joe and Bosco, and it's wonderful. But before that, I bring a study tour from New York Young Foundation, and we go all over India, and we have participants from all different parts of the world. It's very stimulating. We do a Jungian tour of Indian spiritual sites, and one particular year we had two people from both of them from New York, and they saw all this garbage in India because now we have a lot of disposable garbage because we have plastic bags and water bottles and everything. And one person says, "Oh, look, this is such a pity. India was such a nice, simple country, and now they're getting richer, and there's all this garbage. What a problem! What a shame." So he could see a lot of garbage because he was caught in the archetype of righteousness. And the other person says, "Wow, this is a wonderful opportunity for me to start my waste management business. I can make millions of dollars if I can start a waste garbage management business." So he saw an opportunity in the garbage in India. So one person saw a problem, the other person saw the potential. One person was caught in the archetype of Shiva, of destructiveness, of the dark side of the problem. The other was caught in the archetype of Brahma, creation of a new possibility altogether. So you see, in any given situation, what you see is not the absolute reality. What you see is the archetypal lens with which you look at the situation. So basically, that's a predominant ancient mindset. It is archetypal because these are pre-formed systems in our brain which determine how we look at a given situation. So when we are young, psychologically and physically, then we are caught in the archetype of mother and child, that everything looks maternal and we feel like the helpless child. And then we move from the mother archetype, so then we are caught in the mother-son archetype. Then if you move above that dynamic, at the next level is the father-child archetype. We look at others as a powerful father figure on whose shoulders we can sit and look at the world, and so that creates a dynamic of father and child. You don't look up to this parental figure for nurturance, but for guidance, for moving forward in life, to find, discover new things. And then if you still grow up from that, the next level is the warrior archetype. You become warrior-like, you become like a hero, you become, you want to master the situation, you want to conquer the situation, you want to establish yourself. So that is like a Kundalini Yoga, is a third chakra, naval chakra of fire and mastery. So you look at everything with a sense of you want to master it. Then you go above that later in life when you've been there, done it, you've mastered, you established a good business. Then you go above that. You've been there, done it, you've mastered, you established. So you guys are right there. Hello, check. Can you also see other groups on your screen, everyone? I see some echo in one of the groups, but I'll give it a minute to set it up. Okay. One of your my speaker may be very loud or something. Yeah. Okay, that's good. So, so if you move from Kundalini from your navel chakra or mastery or hero archetype, you go into the lower archetype of the heart. Then you see this young woman and you see that you want to establish a connection with her. So this is what the Bollywood is made of. This archetype of love or eros. That is our archetype. In America, the archetype of the hero. We are still caught in the hero phase. Everything, the Superman, Spider-Man, Iron Man, all those are archetypes of the great hero. So America is still caught in the archetype of hero, while we in India are more in the archetype of the eros or lover, Radha Krishna, and so forth. So a lot of Indian context is like Krishna Leela. We are in archetype of love. So then we move from there. We move to the next archetype, which is the archetype of the trickster, the throat chakra. Now, what is that about? That is about finding your voice. Um, because once you have established yourself, when you have a relationship, then you become who you are. You have a certain viewpoint about life. You have a certain way you look at the world. So you have to find your own authentic voice. If you don't find your voice, then of course you have problems like thyroid problems or throat cancer or something or the other. Because that means your archetype of voice, your throat chakra is starting to activate itself. Now, there is a trick about how to find your voice. And of course, as you all know in India, we know this well, that there is a tongue is the most soft organ in the body, but it's also the most sophisticated organ in the body because it is boneless, spineless organ. It is surrounded by 32 very sharp, cutting, biting, grinding, hostile neighbors, and yet your tongue must always speak without getting crushed all the time. And the only way a spineless, boneless organ like a tongue can speak without being crushed by its dangerous neighbors is by being guided by the divine trickster, Hermes, or in our mythology, Krishna. Because Krishna was participant in the Mahabharata, but never touched a weapon. He only was playing with his flute. So the whole idea is to be diplomatic and to be able to establish and speak your voice in ways which does not get you crushed or killed. Otherwise, if you're dead and gone, it's no good having your voice if you're not there. So that is the archetype of trickster. And of course, the next archetype that in our life we have to achieve is the archetype of the leader. Find your leadership, the head chakra, which is how to wear your crown, how to take leadership. And of course, before the end of our life, we must claim connection with the archetype of the mentor, the guru, the seventh chakra. Like Father Joe, he's guiding, the Kripa movement into a servitude of masses and making a real impact in lives of thousands of patients. So that comes from the archetype of the mentor, the guru, the guide. So these are the different archetypes. There are a few more. The most important archetype, of course, the Jung talks about is the archetype of connexio or connection or marriage. How to not the marriage in terms of the traditional marriage, but how to establish a sacred marriage between your ego and your soul, in the sacred marriage between the soul and the spirit. How to establish a union with the divine spirit, with the holy energy. That is really the highest marriage in everyone's life. Uh, in Hindu mythology, it will be a connection between the Atman and the Paramatman or the Brahmana. That is the whole idea of the marriage. So you see, archetypes are very, very important, and it is important to have a working knowledge of what archetype is present in the lives of your patients and what archetype they are operating under, so you can guide your patients in meaningful way and to help them reset their life into an appropriate archetype. So if someone is in the archetype of mother-son in their marriage, will that work for them? Obviously it can't, because your wife cannot be your mother all the time. You have to be equals. Or if you are operating under the archetype of a hero or a conqueror in your marriage, will it work? If you go and become a general in your bedroom, that isn't going to work long term. It will work for a short term, but at the end, it is not going to work. So the only appropriate archetype to deal with a good marriage is the archetype of the lover, the archetype of mutuality, the archetype of an authentic connection between two hearts and two souls. So that would be the archetype of the lover. Excuse me, I must drink a little water. Okay, as we move on, can you all still hear me? Yes? You're doing good?
Yes,
Excellent.
sorry.
Excellent. Well, I'm very glad that we are able to maintain this system working, and we'll keep improving it as we go. But it's good that we are able to keep it going. So the next is the typology, and that is very, very important. Major contribution of Carl Jung. And at some point, when we talk about story of Jung's life, we'll see why it is important. But essentially, he said the following, and this is very news you can use clinically with your patients immediately. Uh, that we have four types of people in this world. There are thinking types, and the opposite of thinking, of course, is the feeling type, as you can see in this chart. So you can't be both. If you're thinking type, then the feeling part will be opposite, will be very, very low in your consciousness. You can't be both. These are the archetypes, they are the opposites. In other words, you can't be water and fire at the same time. And if you are intuitive type, intuition means people who have gut feelings, people who have deep, broad gut feeling about things. So that's called the intuition. Uh, and the sensate does not mean sensational. Sensate means people who have attention to details. Yes, Bosco, you raised your hand. Uh, are you trying to say something? You can type it. Speak loud, a little louder. Or type it out. Are you typing? Oh, very sensate. Okay, sensate means attention to details. Sensate does not mean sensational, it means attention to detail. So, like an accountant or a mathematician, is opposite of people who have like gut feelings. They have a broad stroke that the stock market is going to go up. They just feel it in their bones. That is an intuitive type. They have broad nose for these things. While sensate people don't trust their intuition. They say, well, what are the facts? What are the trends? These are like technical investors versus the gut level investors. They just feel the Apple computer is stock is going to keep going up because these are wonderful products. Versus those who say, well, I don't know, let me look at the facts and the sales figures and all that. So they will only base it on details. So now the challenge for patients is that if you want to do well, you must always work with the inferior function of your patient. If you continue to pay attention to the inferior function, your patient will 99% of the time do better. And here is a important thing to remember that if you have a patient who is very thinking type, logical, you always help them to get in touch with their feelings. You say, yeah, you think this is a good idea, but how do you feel about it? Always keep challenging them on how they feel. If they're very intuitive types, then always challenge them on paying attention to details. And if they are sensate types, say, well, these are the details, but what does your heart tell you? Is this a good thing or not? The details are this girl is pretty, she comes from a good family, she's a doctor, I should marry her. But what does your heart tell you? You can ask anyone in Bollywood, you always follow your heart at the end, yeah? What's your intuition? What's your gut feeling about a person? So what is not right? What is wrong about the situation? Or does it feel right even though it looks wrong on the surface? So sometimes, in spite of the sensate or the details, something in your heart, something in your intuition tells you something different. So you always challenge your patients to build the opposite of their superior function. What is their most familiar function? And there is a saying in the addiction community here in America. It is called "run towards the roar." It's a very famous story. Let me explain that to you. That when you see a lion hunting, it's a National Geographic special on that. When you see a lion hunting, uh, you the way the lion hunts is it has lion and lion has got young cubs, younger lions, like a group of 4 or 5, and they always honor a prey like a heron or a deer in a patch. Usually there is an entrance and an exit on the patch. On one side is deep jungle and the other side is a river or something. In other words, they create a situation where there's only one entrance and one exit, and they trap this prey, this deer or rabbit or whatever, or giraffe or cobra or whatever in this patch. And now the big lion, the old lion goes to the one end, and the young lions go to the other end of this patch. And once they have trapped this prey, then the big lion starts to roar very loudly. Now, what do you think the deer will do? It will always run away from the roar because no one is stupid to walk into the roar of a roaring big lion. Yes, you want to run away from it. It is exactly what will get you killed because the old lion has a very big roar, but not big speed because he's old now. He just has a big voice, like people who are the old established. So the only way this prey can survive is to run towards the roar, meaning to run towards where there's danger, sound. Because if he runs towards the other side, then the young lions don't have a big voice, big roar, but they're very fast because they're young. They haven't cultivated their voice yet, and they can quickly catch this prey and eat it. So in life, you always run towards the roar. When something frightens you, walk towards it, confront it, because that is the only way you can master your addiction or your depression or your problem. Uh, to take on that which frightens you. If you are afraid to talk to your boss about something, or to your parents about something, or your best friend about something, you want to avoid it. It's very uncomfortable. It's a big roar. Do it, because that's the only way to be authentic, to free yourself. The truth shall set you free. So I think it's very, very important to work the typology of your patient and to make sure that you are helping them balance their typology. The next thing you do in typology is there are two types of people in this world. Everyone falls in one of these two types. Are we still all okay? Or I've worn you all out? We're doing good? Continue? Yes?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Okay, good, excellent. The next one is the attitude. There are two groups of people, introverted and extroverted. Of course, there are cultural differences. A person who is a introvert in America will pass on as a very normal person in Japan or India because we are tolerant of people who are quiet and do their own thing. In America, if you are an introvert, then they think that you are depressed, schizophrenic, or inadequate. Because culturally, this is an extroverted culture. People talk and they reach out and they are in your face. So they're loud. So I think that cultural differences. But even within that context, at the end of the day, we have either an introverted or extroverted attitude. And the goal of individuation, the goal of healing, the goal of sobriety is to claim access. You cannot, if you're an extrovert, you cannot become an introvert. If you're an introvert, you cannot become an extrovert. But the goal of sobriety, the goal of healing, the goal of wellness is to have adequate access to that attitude which is not your strong suit. So, for example, if you're an introvert, then that is okay. This is how God made you. But when the moment calls for, when the situation calls for it, you and I should be able to step on the stage and to claim our extroversion or our connectivity, at least for the task at hand. So, for example, if I'm a big introvert, that's fine. I can be an introvert. But right now, I have to extrovert a little bit so I can give you a meaningful presentation. If I'm shy, I'm quiet, I'm not outgoing, I will not be able to do adequate justice to this task. On the other hand, if you are very extroverted, but for the sake of this lecture and taking in this some idea of wisdom, you'll have to be quiet and be introverted. So you allow this information to come in. So whatever your nature, when the moment calls for it, when the task at hand calls for it, we, you and I should be able to step up to the stage of consciousness and claim adequate amount of introversion or extroversion as the circumstances demand. That is the goal of individuation. So it does not mean you become total the opposite of what you are. But when you need to, for short times, you should be able to access it. That is the goal of wholeness. So when you are doing therapy with someone introvert, you don't make them an extrovert. You say, well, that's okay. That is how God made you. But you must teach them skills of how to adequately be an extrovert for short amount of times if it calls for it, like your presentation in their work or their business or when they have to speak up about something important. They must find their voice, however difficult it is. It is our cross to bear, to do things that are uncomfortable for us. That is the way to healing and wholeness. And we must give our patients who are recovering tools, permission, and encouragement to have access to these other parts of themselves. That is the task of a healer, of a therapist, of a counselor, of a doctor. So the goals of individuation or healing or wholeness, individuation means becoming whole, is to be conscious of what is your typological makeup. What is your type? Are you thinking type, feeling type, intuitive type, or sensate type? Second task is to have some access to all four functions and both your attitudes as circumstances demand. Not all the time, but at times. So if you're a thinking type, that's fine. But if your best friend, son is very sick, you can't be logical. You have to show some feelings. You have to say, hold your friend's hand or give him a hug and say, I love you, I love your family. This too shall pass. I'm ready to help in any way I can. To be able to show some feelings. The goal of individuation or recovery or sobriety is to master the inferior function. Remember, when in doubt, always find out what your patient's inferior function is and help them get some degree of access to it. That is the treasure hard to find. That is the goal of individuation process. And after this, we'll take 5 minute break so you can all have a little water and run around. The goal of individuation at the end is to have a feeling function, meaning when all is said and done, you must always access how do you really feel about it. Because at the end, the heart is where your soul lives. You cannot bypass your feeling function. So, in all psychological systems, they say at the end, your feeling function is the conductor of the symphony orchestra of your life. Always access it. Always take a pulse of how you really feel about something. So, I think we will probably take a 5 minute break so you can all walk about, yeah, and have a little uh, touch base with each other, and then we reconvene in 5 minutes. Is that okay, Bosco? Yes? Good, good. 5 minutes break. We go in 5 minutes time and we continue with the presentation, okay? See you all. 5 minutes. Thank you.
Where's my sandwiches and
Let's 0-0.
What you want?
See?
1000 minutes.
Won't come on, you know that.
1000 minutes.
who was talking?
Where's this?
You can't video call because the camera is connected here no, right now. Just speak like
Because
that.
I began.
Yeah, yes. Your mic I think is giving trouble. We can't hear you. It's squealing.
The mic is screeching.
This mic is
So it looks like Vasant Kripa is the best.
The best.
Well, good, yeah. Very
You're
good.
saying that.
Huh? Well, good. We have no problem with it.
See all this junk you just put on your Instagram.
It is a good job.
No, but you know what he's not done? He's not activated this.
So that's what I'm saying.
So call him and tell him.
I'll call him.
He has to just activate this.
What's that? That the make? Yeah, make my microphone. Tell Bosco, no?
It's in between this and this. It's in between the webcam and the speaker.
Put Bosco on the call, no?
Wait a minute.
I mean, have my cup that cheer.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bosco, Bandra. Yeah, you can activate your mic on your screen. It's on top. Oh, there's a problem.
The mic is full.
Mic is spoiled.
Okay, you talk to him here. Here, it can be.
First, get him on the line.
Here.
Hello?
Yeah, I got it. I can, you can.
No, you can't. Say something.
We can't hear him at all.
No audio.
Hey, hello.
No.
It's like a whisper
It's
actually.
like a whisper, like
It's like a whisper.
Can't.
it's coming, but it's echoing.
Okay. Sentence.
Yeah, just tell all of them to sit down. Then I'm taking a photograph of them. Just call them and sit down all together, okay?
I'll just call everyone and also take a photo first.
Okay, we call them. Yeah.
But tell him he's coming broken.
Yeah,
He's coming broken.
Also, when you're speaking now, you're coming broken. On the mic.
Yeah, because I think this is of our net everything broadband. A connection. Because yesterday from home it was coming perfectly when I spoke. 1 minute, now you tell me, can you hear me now? Cut this phone, just keep this phone now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, better.
Okay,
Yes,
so all
better.
of you, but keep Mosen behind because he's a fatty. Keep that fatty Mosen behind. Please say something loudly.
Mosin is gone down, boss, sir.
I'm sorry, boss.
Okay, then more than fatty, keep him at the side. Hey, doc, I can, you can hear me? Dr. Bedi, can you hear me?
I can hear you all a little bit. If you come close to the mic and speak loud, I can hear you better. Put it next to your mouth and then we can
Dr.
probably
Bedi,
hear
can
better.
you hear me now? Can you hear me? Dr. Bedi, can you hear me now?
I can hear you a little bit, Bosco, but why don't you bring it very close to your mouth, the mic? You have a,
One mic like this,
Yeah.
one
Dr.
mic
Bedi,
like
can
this,
you hear me?
or the conference mic. So we can put it actually
I'll get another mic tomorrow.
this.
okay, good, good. I can hear the Vasai people better.
Yes.
Yes.
Nasa has done a good job.
Yeah, because I only said
We are all savvy girls, computer savvy people.
Doctor,
That's
I am
no, no,
chatting with
they
you.
will
Please come on the chat.
I'm sorry?
Mohsen,
Come close to the mic. Okay, okay, I can do that. I will come close to the mic. Is that better, Dr. Sani?
Yeah, I can hear you very
Yes?
clearly.
Okay, good, good, good. Yeah, I'll stay close to the mic. That is good. Okay, Bosco, you're calling on video, okay? Yes, Bosco.
yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
Doc, I'm getting you very clear.
Sitting up in
And so
Nasa.
also Goa is getting you very clear.
Yeah, because this conference,
Hospital is having a problem
because
too.
of
So at
this
Kolkata was trying to get in, Guwahati was trying to get in,
workshop.
and
Yeah.
Shillong.
Where are you? I can
Both
see
those
you there on the
places, how
screen,
people
not
were on a work in category.
I think they may have different, their internet connection may not be the good.
Yes, yes. Otherwise, it's beautiful. Please send me this recording, yeah?
to know who's
Yes,
seeing now.
do
Is
the
it the
details
same?
and I can give it to them. But it's good, I've taken the
Okay.
photographs already. You'll see it on the blog
All
in
right,
another
wonderful.
1 hour's time.
So I will hang up on the
Thank
Skype
you.
now and start on the regular thing, okay?
Yeah,
Okay, good.
yeah.
Yeah, I recognize him.
So let us start again. Looks like everyone is almost back. Yes. So let us continue.
Thank you very much.
And I know Mr. Sahani said that my voice goes up and down, so I will try to be more consistent and not move too much. That's a good suggestion. Can you hear me okay now? Mr. Sahani? Yeah? Yes. Okay. Excellent. So let's go to the alchemy now. This is an important concept, and of course, we'll have to develop this concept over a few meetings. But I want to introduce you to this idea of alchemy and what Jung meant by it. And at the end, forget these terms adapt and sorrow. It just means, let's say, doctor and the patient. Let's say adapt is a doctor and the sorrow is the patient, or there are two people, but this is easier model. So these two people have different levels of relationships, which is what a doctor and the patient has. The first relationship, A, is a conscious to conscious relationship. Meaning when you're talking to someone, when you're relating to someone, the first relationship is a conscious to conscious relationship. Uh, the relationship B is your relationship to your own unconscious, your own soul, and the patient's relationship to their own soul, meaning their anima or animus, which means they're contrasexual, their masculine potential or feminine potential. Assuming this is a doctor is a male, his connection is with his anima or inner feminine. If the patient is a woman, then her connection is with her inner masculine, and vice versa. Of course, if both of them are men and women, then it becomes a little more complex. But easier is to remember, rather than anima or animus, it's your connection with your own soul, with a deeper part of your personality. So that's the relationship B. Now, the goal of therapy normally is for the doctor to have a connection with the unconscious of the patient, which is number D, meaning how do you connect with the unconscious of a patient. That is what our training is all about. That is why we access the complexes. That is why we look at the typology. That is why we look at what the archetype of the patient is. That is a way What are the dreams of the patient? What are the synchronistic events in patient's life? What does their addiction tell us about their soul? What does their depression tell us? Like my patient who is all fire energy, for her, a depression is a water energy which will help her stay calm and centered. Otherwise, she will never get into her soul and get well. So the idea is for the doctor or the counselor or the addiction counselor or the therapist or the psychotherapist to have a technique, a framework, a system like Jungian or Freudian or 12 step to start getting connected and reading the unconscious of the patient. And once that is done, then the doctor has to communicate that information to their patient consciously via a mechanism, man to man, person to person, or help the patient become conscious of their own unconscious with the help of the therapist. So these mechanisms are all meant to increase the consciousness or the awareness of the patients with their own unconscious. But there is a fourth level of relationship, which is a connection between the unconscious of the patient and the unconscious of the doctor, which is C, which is the most profound of all human relationships. That is the mechanism which does not participate through consciousness, but only through unconsciousness. Jung calls this the participatio mystique, the unmystical or unconscious participation into the matrix or the soul of the other. This is the mechanism via which a mother and child communicate with each other. Because a child, a 3-month-old child, cannot consciously connect with their mother. There is no language which has evolved developmentally to give you information about ways to communicate with your parent or your mother. Your child's life depends on an unconscious to unconscious communication with your mother. Because when a child is hungry, the mother unconsciously knows that the child is hungry. When the child is sick, the mother unconsciously knows when the child is sick. You don't need language for that. And similarly, a good therapist immediately, not immediately, but with some training, can learn what is going on in the unconscious of the patient. That is what how you cultivate the archetype of the healer. For example, I gave some example in Mumbai last time. Some of you may remember that when this patient would come to me on Thursdays at 3 o'clock, our regular therapy time, I would be doing fine at 2 o'clock. I'd feel great at 4 o'clock. But between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock, I'll get a big backache when I see this patient. Always upper back pain, up here. I had to like have a massage myself or tell me to little yoga like Father Joe taught me this. Gurudashan, remember this pose of relaxing your shoulder. So I had to spend 10 minutes to untangle my back after the session. And I could not understand what was going on, but my body knew something was going on. And then I communicated this problem to my patient after 6 months of not, being able to crack it. I said, look, Jenny, whenever I see you, I get this upper back pain. Can you make any sense of it? She says, oh, doctor, I know exactly what you have because I have this all my life. So this patient has the same pain. And the pain of upper back pain, who gets the upper back pain? Do you know the mythology of a person who carries the world on their back? Atlas carries the world on his back, yes? So this woman, Jenny, she had a big caretaker complex, huge codependency, alcoholic husband and a depressed mother and children who were, addicted and not doing anything. And this woman was carrying the burden, Jenny was carrying the burden of all these family members. So she was caught in the caretaker complex, the great mother complex. And so her shoulders were always hurting. She was depressed by the weight of this world she was carrying like Atlas. And I became sensitive to it and started to feel the upper back pain myself. I became the Atlas with her. There was an unconscious to unconscious communication between us. So you know in your body, in your heart, without the language, what is your patient suffering from. And that is the most important type of relationship. So in psychotherapy, always be respectful of and open to what you're thinking, what you're feeling, not what just your patient is telling you, but how are you experiencing your patient? That is the most important thing. When the patient is really telling you in denial of their addiction, you know in your bones what's going on. If they say one thing but you feel something else is going on, it's very, very important to honor this unconscious to unconscious communication, like a mother and child. So that is the whole idea of alchemy of relationships. There's much more to this mystery. There's much more of how to untangle it. There's much more how to understand it. And in our presentation on alchemy and the Rosarium images in volume 16 that you have in your library, you can look at Rosarium images, the psychology of transference, of the connection between the doctor and the patient. And we will talk about this in a special lecture on transference and alchemy. But this is something I wanted to introduce you to today for your information. Now, this is a model of psyche, which is important to remember. I know it's a little busy chart, but it is worthwhile spending just a little minute on this. And as you see on the outside is the external reality. Oh, Father Joe has joined us, looks like. And let's see if we can get him, if you can join us. Oh, there you are. I can see him, but I can't see his picture somehow. Welcome, Father Joe. I'm so glad you could join us. We are in the second half of the presentation and we have discussed basic young with the different people. So I'm very glad you could join us. I wonder if you can be present on your video, then we can see you also. I will enable your audio. There you are. So your audio is enabled and
Hello.
sorry.
For a screen, you can for a screen.
Once he connects, it automatically connects.
So he has to connect.
Yeah, he has to. We are online.
Is there no see on the list?
Yeah, I am online, he says.
I.
His video is not online.
Father, your video is not on, only the audio. All right, we'll continue and let's see if Father can join us in the.
Yeah, only his audio.
Okay, so everyone's audio is working. There you are. I think Father Joyce, come on. Hello, Father. I can see you now. Wonderful to see you. How's your trip going? Going well.
You can see.
Excellent.
Yeah, there, Father.
Yeah.
So we had a good meeting so far. We have discussed once again, reviewed basic young for the group because some people are new, and we discussed the whole idea of complexes. We talked about the archetypes, how to understand some basics of archetype in your work. We talked about the typology of the patients. We talked about the alchemy of relationships. So everyone has at least a working idea of what these terms mean before we deepen them over next several months of lectures and discussions. And then I was giving them this total map of the psyche. I was telling the group that this is a little bit of a busy map, but is worth keeping in mind. And this whole lecture is being taped, so this will be available to all the staff members for viewing on demand in their own time. And I will send a link for how to access it to everyone today or tomorrow. So then continuing, we have, when our patients come to us, they are dealing with their external reality, as you can see on top of that slide. They are dealing with a problem in their marriage or problem with their job or problem in a certain relationship or an issue. And the way you, all right, yes. So the way to start assessing how this patient is behaving is to look at how they respond to a certain event in their life. Let's say if in my presentation right now, I will give you a simple example. If I see one of you is person in the audience is tired and yawning and sleepy, so this is just a simple event. Now my thought would be, if I'm caught in a complex of inadequacy, that I am inadequate, I'm not good, then my thought is that I'm inadequate. This person is bored because I am not a good presenter. Then my feeling will be, I'll feel inadequate, I will feel worthless, I will feel incompetent, I will feel unlovable. So that will be the feeling. You're following the second line under the external reality. Then I'll start behaving as if I'm inadequate. So I'll start fumbling and stumbling, and I will start stuttering, and I will make mistakes. And the consequence will be that indeed I will be a disaster, and we all think I'm a disaster. So you see, I will create my own reality based on my perception of the event. Now, if I have a good self-esteem, if I am not addicted but sober, if I have a good sense of my own soul, and I know who I am and that I've worked hard, and this is a good enough presentation, that even if one of you is looking tired and sleepy, I will say, well, it is early in the morning in Mumbai, and people have just gotten up, and it is possible that one of you was busy ministering to a patient or a client, or was up in the hospital or had a family crisis, and I will not personalize it. And then my thought will be, I'll have empathy for the person who's looking tired rather than to feel that I'm inadequate and be self-referential, which is narcissistic. And then I will feel empathy for the person rather than putting myself down. Then I'll behave in a compassionate way and be accepting of this person who is looking tired. And the consequence will be there'll be a deeper soul connection between the person who is yawning and tired, and not my becoming sort of self-referential and self-demeaning. So this is a karmic cycle we can create because of our cognitive distortions. Now, where do these cognitive distortions come from? What are the genesis, the origins of such distortions? They are obviously not in the outer reality, because as we discussed in the image of archetypes, what we see is a function of what we are feeling and thinking. What are the lens we use to perceive ourselves and the others and the world around us? That is what mediates our perception of reality. There is no absolute reality as such. So when that happens, when we misperceive events and have distorted thoughts and feelings and negative behavioral choices and karmic consequences, that all comes from a disturbance in our personal unconscious. Meaning, in our earlier life, if we had relationships in which, say, a relationship with a parent, a father, who was not affirming, not approving, then I will project the inner, then I'm caught in a father complex. That is the personal unconscious. And that father complex will then be the lens with which I will look at the response of my audience. So if out of 50 people, 20 people, one person is tired, I will focus on that one person's behavior as a measure of my self-esteem rather than the other 19 people who are deeply involved, interested, and taking deep interest in what I'm doing. So that would be a personal experience or a personal unconscious or a certain complex. We all have complexes. The question is, what is our complex? What is our unique scar that we carry in our soul? That is the only point. So then, if that is the case, then we have to work through that wound, that personal unconscious, and go into the archetype of the self or the soul, meaning what is my soul saying in this moment. So now, if I'm presenting this lecture, for example, to be feeling great and wonderful, then I will always be self-evaluative, and then I'm caught in the archetype of the ego. But if I, for example, am presenting this lecture as a way to reach out to my fellow healers and to reach out to my countrymen who are doing hard work, to reach out to thousands of patients in far reaches of the downtrodden India, then I will be in the archetype of the soul as a friend, as a mentor to some, as a guide. And then it will not be about self-evaluation, but it's about service. I'll be in the archetype of service and not in the archetype of narcissism. So that is where the self archetype comes. That is the level at which one has to heal a client. So sometimes an addict is caught in this self-narcissistic, self-evaluative, narrow, constricted, distorted frame of reference. And the goal at that time is to help your patient descend into the archetype of their soul. What does this really mean to you at a soul level, not at the ego level, not at the narcissistic level? Only then we come into our authenticity. Then we become not only sober but spiritually engaged, and that is the source of healing and sobriety. So I think that all that wisdom comes from the collective unconscious, from the spirit, from the Holy Spirit, from the soil of healing that is part of the collective, which was Young's formulation. So I think this is an idea of how to sort of work these layers of one's psyche to help them establish a sense of connection with their soul and to remove the crust of the scars of their ego consciousness, which usually mediate our perception of ourselves and the others and the world around us. That is the task of the healer to help the patient move from that limited outer ego driven frame of reference to a deeper soul guided frame of reference. That is the task of healing. And that is the task, that is a journey we must help our patient make during their recovery, during their movement from addiction to sobriety and from sobriety to a spiritual grounding of their purpose in this lifetime. So then moving on to the next presentation, we'll now talk about just a little bit about each person's personal myth and how to help tune into, how to help your patient discover what their myth is, what their life's story is, what is their purpose is, and that comes from what we call our personal myth. The myth is, and I'll give you one or two examples so this will become clear. But I will just tell you how you start tuning in to the personal myth of your patient. And the kind of things you look at are their daydreams, their fantasies, their dreams, synchronistic events in their life, their medical and psychiatric problems, their hang-ups or complexes, their fascinations, their encounters with art, movies, creative contents, all those things give an indication to your own personal way. For example, there was one certain movie when I was a child which helped me make a decision to become a physician. And some of you may have seen it, but most of you are very young and may not have seen it. It was a movie called Himalaya Ki God Mein. Does anyone remember that movie at all? Was a very little B-budget movie by Manoj Kumar, and it really touched me, and that moved me to want to become a physician. And then later, when I was in medical school, there was a movie that touched me so deeply that I decided to. That was not the only reason, but it became sort of the final motivation to become a psychiatrist and a psychoanalyst. And that movie was called Khamoshi. Any one of you remember that movie Khamoshi? Was Rajesh Khanna and Ravindra were the actors with one very nice actress, I don't remember her name, but was a very moving account of the counter-transference psychosis of a nurse. So sometimes these things touch you, not because there's any magic in the movie, but I was ready to get some guidance from the soul. So here are two or three examples of how to look at your patient's neck. I know you can't properly see these two elephants, but there's an elephant here with a trunk down, and the elephant that you can't see properly is the elephant with the trunk up in the air, like this. One with the trunk, let's see, trunk down, and the other with the trunk up, like this. Here we go. So the two elephants, the trunk down and trunk up. So this is a story of my patient Bob, who is a manic depressive and a drug addict, and he's a successful businessman. But after every bout of success, every 2 3 years, he will start using alcohol and drugs, cocaine, and he will get manic and he will sabotage his business, and then he will burn and crash. Then he had this dream about two baby elephants playing, and in the dream, these two elephants, one was on the top of a hill with his trunk up in the air, and there was a little baby elephant in the valley with the nose to the ground. And initially, we did not understand what this dream was saying, but then it makes sense after I invoked the archetype of Ganesha. That always, if you know in Indian iconography, we always show all the deities with elephants with their trunk up, which is supposed to be an auspicious symbol. And this is what my patient's approach was. He was always looking up to the sky, looking for higher ground, looking for success, looking for auspiciousness. But he never looked down on the ground. He never looked at the solid earth, at Mother Earth. He never looked at the inner life. He was always looking in the sky, never on earth. So there was a disunion between the earth and the sky, between higher aspirations and a sense of structure and groundedness in his life. And when this dream indicated that even though for his professional success it was important to look up for his personal and soulful success and personal grounding. It was important to look down, to have a sense of solid earth under him, to have a sense of spiritual grounding, to have a sense of relational grounding, to have a sense of structure in daily life for prayer, for reflection, for exercise, for meditation, for time with his loved ones. So when he started to attend to this elephant with the nose down, not always focused on with the elephant and the nose up, then there became a sense of balance in his life. So these two sacred elephants gave him a sense of his myth of a need to balance his view of the sky with the view of the earth. The other way to look at this was his myth was a myth of Icarus, the god that is always flying close to the sun, so close that after a while his wax wings they melt and then it burns and crashes into the ocean and dies. So manics have a tendency to keep flying higher and higher, like narcissistic people or addicts. They never have a method to get themselves close to Mother Earth, close to our ground, to structure. And it is through therapy, through psychotherapy, through 12-step program that we help them establish this sense of ground and structure and connectivity with simple things in life. That is a way of healing addicts. So this is a very common myth in of Icarus and the elephant with the nose up, and it becomes the task of the therapist to hold the patient's feet to fire and keep them close to the ground, keep them close to the structure. They say, "Oh, I can't come and see you, doctor, every week. I'm a very busy man." So, well, if you want to live, if you want to be sober, if you want to save your marriage, if you want to save your life, you have to come every day, every week. Otherwise, you probably will relapse and you will die. We must be honest with our patients and insist on a optimal structure, optimal grounding, optimal connection to a sense of simple, structured, spiritually connected life if they're going to get well. We can't take their excuse as a way to enable them. Oh, yes, you're a busy man. Let's meet every 2, 3 weeks. If you feel that they need to come every week or every 2 weeks, you must insist on it and not have the tail wag the dog. Because we often get pushed by star patients or narcissistic patients. We must hold our authority as healers and therapists and doctors and counselors. Not because of our narcissism, but that is the only thing that can heal our patients. When we hold our authority on behalf of the God, of the collective. That is very, very important. This is another patient of mine who is a physician who has been in therapy now. Is also a recovering alcoholic. He's done very well, and here was he was a very driven physician, workaholic, and of course alcoholic also. Then he will work like a dog and then go and get drunk every night, and then somehow rally in the morning and work like a dog whole day and crash. So this was my story, and then he came to me for therapy. And after a few months in therapy, remember this painting which is in at the Art Museum in Chicago.
It is
Seven
And this famous painting is called The Castigation of Arrows. The Virgo is the name of my patient. And in this image, you can probably not see, but the person who's holding the whip in his hand is Ares, the god of war. And the person is on the floor, god of love. And the person who's intervening between the two gods who are the Ares beating up the arrows.
whole night they are
Who is the anima function, the feminine, who's trying to mediate and break up the two. So this was the story of his life. That all his life he was always work driven, and his soulful, grounded, spiritual side was on the ground, beat up by this workaholic, alcoholic part of him. And his anima function, his wife, his daughter, and later on his therapist, which is me, were carrying this anima function, breaking up the two, giving time for this eros, the relational, mutual, spiritual part of him to be able to stand up and be eye to eye, toe to toe with this aggressive, workaholic, alcoholic part of him. And in the story of his life, both these parts had to be in the mix because had to work, but he also had to make room for this aesthetic, creative, spiritual, relational, emotional, grounded part of him. And when these two were in balance, Then he came into his wholeness. He cut down his work. He started paying more attention to his children and his marriage. He reconnected with his friends. He has a nice connection with his sober fellowship. So this is an example. The myth of this patient was a myth. He was caught in the archetype of Ares, or the god of war, and his healing came from the balancing archetype of Eros, or the god of love or relationships. And the therapist, the recovery team had to carry the function of this anima, of this feminine, of this healing great mother, who could break up these two parts and then give both parts their fair share, their due share in economy of his psyche and in the resolution of his addiction. So that was the myth of this patient. Um, and I think before we sort of close the formal part of it, I just want to uh, say a little bit about Jung's work on individuation and how for an individual to come into his wholeness. It is good to remember this when you work with your patients. It's a good roadmap to have as you work with your patients with addiction or depression or AIDS or any life-threatening illness. That the first thing you do at the bottom of this pyramid is unio naturalis. Assess what your patient's authentic nature is. In Vedanta, they say that discover your nature. If you are a lion, be a good lion. If you are a lamb, be a good lamb. A lion does not eat grass, and a lamb does not go hunting. So the goal, if you're a lion, is to be a good lion, a spiritual lion, a soulful lion, a just lion, a true king, not to become a lamb. That is not the way of the soul. And if you're a lamb, be humble, be soulful, be a place of sacrifice. That is your true nature. You don't try to be a lion. So the first task of wholeness, the first task of recovery is to discover the true nature of the patient and help them unite with it. Unio means union with your authentic nature. Find your authentic nature and make a connection with it. The next level, that in alchemy, that is represented by color black or negredo, meaning everything starts out with darkness, with blackness, with shadow, with a problem, with an addiction, with a depression, with a marital problem, with a complex. That is a good sign. That means there is something you have to work with. If a patient comes to you and says, "Oh, I'm fine, doctor. I'm fine, father. I'm no problem. Just a little problem in my marriage, and I drink a little now and then." That's a big problem. This patient is never going to get well. But when the patient surrenders, he comes and says, "I have a big problem with addiction. I have a big problem in my marriage. I had an affair. I'm messing things up." That is, they are in touch with their true nature. They are in touch with the darkness in their life. That they are in touch with what in alchemy we call the nigredo. That is a very good starting point. That means the patient is in a place of acceptance and surrender, preparation for surrender of their problems. If they are in denial, then you have to stay with it till they truly acknowledge the true nature and the true nature of their problem. Do not move to the next step till you work. Sometimes it may take 6 months to 12 months to really work on unio naturalis. Someone, "Oh, I drink a little once in a while." Say, "Well, what is little? What are the consequences?" And when you stick with it, then you will find that only when they authentically accept what their problem is and what their nature is, then you have something to work with. So that is called, Jung called that nigredo or darkness. But nigredo does not mean negative. It just means the problem is in darkness. That is where the darkness is in patient's life. But that is also means that if we can potentially throw light on this problem, we claim consciousness, we claim sobriety, we claim potential. So it's a good thing, not a bad thing. The next thing we do is to, once we know the patient's nature and the nature of the problem, the next step in individuation or sobriety or healing is unio mentalis, to have a little bit of a roadmap of your psyche. What are your complexes? What archetype are you caught in? What is your typology? What is your personal myth? What is your alchemic personality? Are you a fire personality, water personality, earth, air personality? How do you relate to others? Like I gave you the example of the patient with fire personality with manic problems and affairs. So that is knowing your true nature, and more from that, knowing what the map of your psyche is. What is your personal psychological map? That is unio mentalis. What is the clarity about that? In alchemy, that is represented by color white and represented in Latin by the term albatio or whitening or baptism. Baptism means being born into the consciousness of your road, of your psychological map. So now you have insight, and that is very, very important next step once you have unio naturalis. Now this is very, very exciting when you learn about your patients' complexes and archetypes and typology and alchemic problems and so forth, but it is very seductive because this is just a step in the total healing of the patient. After this whitening or albatio or baptism into their insight comes the next step of alchemy in your work with your patients. Unio spiritualis, meaning what is the spiritual purpose in your life? What is your dharmic purpose? What is the reason why God put you in this world? That is very important to struggle with. And in alchemy, that is represented by color yellow or gold or saffron. So it is called unio that is called citrinatio, meaning the color of gold, color of spiritual awareness, color of spiritual awakening. You start getting a sense of what your spiritual purpose in this life is. So it is important to help your patients move into that level of unio spiritualis. And once you have that, most people get excited. They say, oh, I know my darkness. Now I know my roadmap of my psyche. I also know my spiritual purpose. I'm done. No, the work is now only the middle of your individuation or healing. The next and the most important step of alchemy is unio corporalis, meaning taking all these insights, unio naturalis, unio mentalis, uno spiritualis, and then putting this into the body, living out your myth, living out your truth, living out your purpose. That is the color red, rubatio, the color of blood of Christ. Because Christ did not just give lectures, Christ did not just establish schools, Christ did not establish an empire. What he did was to bear his cross and he spilled his blood for what he believed in. Each one of us truly heals from our problems when we are willing to shed our sweat and our blood and put our body in the line for what we believe in. Unless we are willing to make that sacrifice, Rubatio, it's all gobbledygook. It is only talk. It is talking the talk, not walking the walk. So it's very, very important that we hold our patients to count and ourselves to count, that we put our body on the line, put all we have got on the line and sacrifice it. Only then true healing can begin. Without that sacrifice and service, there is no true healing. Your patient will have wonderful insight, will can write a wonderful story of their life, but they will not heal till they put their body on the line, till they bear their cross, till they make that sacrifice. So that is the color red, rubatio, color of Christ, color of the sacrifice. Buddha did not just give lectures on disengagement and detachment. He left his father's kingdom. He went into the jungle for 6 years. He got his wisdom under the Bodhisattva tree, and then he became Gautam Buddha. Christ became Jesus Christ. So, and Moses did not just give lectures on finding the Holy Land. He left his comfortable, peaceful, princely life and wandered the desert for 40 years. That is how he became Moses and guided his people. So we are, of course, not Gandhi or we are not Christ or Buddha. We are simple people. But each one of us, in our own small, humble way, must be willing to bear our cross and to stand up and put our body and our resources online for what we believe in. In our 12-step lingo, it is called walking the walk. Talking the talk is cheap. It is a good start. We must all fake it till we make it. But at the end, there is no true healing, no true sobriety till we are willing to walk that walk and make the sacrifice for what we believe in. Ugio corporalis. And when we ascend to that level of engagement with our life's individuation, then we become unus mundus. Then we become part of this collective. Then we become a meaningful spoke in cogwheel of higher order of God. Then we become purposeful and engaged with our spiritual dharma. Then we become part of Christ consciousness, Buddha consciousness, Krishna consciousness. Then we become what we are meant to be. Then we become stardust. Then we become one with the world energy. That is the unus mundus. Then there is no addiction, there is no narcissism, because we are one with the universe around us. We are part of the spirit and its beneficence and its grace. So we are then in grace because we are part of that energy. And then addictions, depression, all those become irrelevant. So that is a very high level of being, and that is what we aspire to. But these steps of individuation are ones we should keep working on with our patients and in our own life, because unless we as healers walk this walk and struggle with our own work, we cannot be helpful to our patients. We don't need to strive for perfection, but we need to engage this process. That is the goal of individuation. So in conclusion then, I think we remember this whole idea of CAPES. You must understand the complexes of your patient, understand the archetype in which they are caught in at the moment, understand their personality type, meaning whether they are thinking type or feeling type, sensate type or intuitive type, they are introvert or extrovert, what phase of individuation they are they able to unite the opposites on their personality, that map of mentalis, uno spiritualis, etc. Where are they at? That is important. And then remember to move from the ego orientation to the soul orientation, from outer purpose to the inner calling. That is the goal of healing, of sobriety, and of individuation. And I think those are the steps we keep working on. So I think we all have a very good capsule of very, very basic young. I think you all have been attentive audience. I'm very glad Father Joe is able to join us in spite of being late in the day. So we are grateful for that. And we can talk a little bit. I've not tested the mic of the participants. I know it's been a problem, but I hope you can all hear me. Is that been okay? Everyone been able to hear me so far? Yes? Just raise your hands if you've been able to hear me okay. Yeah, that way I know that you've been able to hear me. Wonderful. Well, I'm glad at least this part of the audio and video is working. Now we can use 5-10 minutes for some questions. If you can speak clearly in the mic, I'll see if you can hear it. If not, you can type your question out in the chat section and I will address it. So go ahead. Um, let's see. Someone wants to speak up or ask a question or type out a question. Looks like one or two groups have disappeared. Let's see if Father Joe can have access to the mic. Can you all are able to speak now if you want, or if not, type out a question. Yeah. All right. Let's see. What slide number are you talking about? I can go back to that. On Anima slide, which number was that? Let's see. You can see the number on the side. Here you go.
Yeah, might be.
Yes. Yes. Go ahead.
Oh.
Stanley, you can speak now. Yes. Mic is.
To concentrate.
Slide.
Wait, I
Yes.
think it's still on.
It's on because the light is there on the camera, no?
Projector come out.
Projectors.
Slide 19. Okay. Okay, right. Well, this is a way to discover your personal myth. And these are ways you can start discovering your personal myth. If you have a daydream or a fantasy sometimes, or a dream, like I told you, the dream of the three holy fathers, or a synchronistic event in your life, that will push you into your personal myth or a medical or psychiatric illness. For example, if you have a thyroid problem, that is a problem, but is also your myth. That means you must struggle to find your authentic voice. You must find a way to express what you really believe in your life. Or if you have a hang up or a complex, for example, the patient I had who had a hang up of always flying up in the air, this head patient was struggling with the myth of Icarus, always flying high. His balance, his individuation came from finding a solid ground, to be more grounded. Or a relationship.
Just stand by.
Every relationship
Wait.
is an indication of what your personal myth is, what fascinates you, what catches you. For example, if you are attracted to a certain person or you're envious of a certain person, that means that person carries your soul's unlived potential. And the goal is not to be envious or to fall in love with this person. I mean, that is your choice too, if that is an option. But more important than that is also to assess and discern what part of my soul is this person carrying, because what fascinates me about the other is a mirror to my own unlived potential, a reflection of my soul's unlived story. So that is what fascinates us about a person or about a piece of art or a movie or a creative content, that all of these, or a daydream or a medical or psychiatric problem. For example, if you have a heart problem, it is not just a heart problem. It also means that you have not lived your heart chakra, that you have not lived your relational potential for mutuality. If you have a uh, eye problem, then I think it only does not mean it's just an eye problem. It also means there is a need to look inside oneself for what one has not yet seen. Or if you have a headache, it is not just a headache. It also means what is the crown you've been unwilling to wear, what leadership you're unwilling to claim in your chosen profession or your chosen purpose in life. So I think all these things that we have here are a way to give you some guidance as to what is your personal myth, what makes you tick, what is your spiritual purpose in this life. Personal myth is not about a myth, it is about your prescription of your soul as to what is it that you need to live out in this lifetime.
Inactive.
Okay, type out your question. Can't hear you very well. In the chat section, just write out your next question. We'll take one or two more questions. Yeah. Right. Anyone has any more questions? And you can just type them in this section. Oh, okay. It looks like we are all comfortable with the presentation, and if no one has anything more, we can, let's see. Yes, Father, go ahead. Yeah, just type out what you want, Father Joe, because your mic is not, I can't hear you, but if you just want to type it out, that way I can respond to it. Father Joe is typing something, that's good.
Dr. Bedi,
Yes. Yes, Bosco, go ahead. Someone, I can hear someone. Yes, I think it is a good idea to be able to translate this into Hindi, for example, so that it is more accessible to a lot of people. We can try that sometimes. If someone can help me with translating that into Hindi idea, Hindu language. We have the same problem in Ahmedabad, where I go there. Not many people speak very good English, so I speak in Gujarati, improvised Gujarati. It works out fine. So we will certainly try that. and see if we can get these ideas more Indianized. That is a wonderful suggestion, Father. So, any other thoughts or reflections for today? I wish we can have a system whereby I can hear you better, all of you, because that will make it much more two-way. In theory, if you have good mics, you should be able to speak, and I can hear some of you sometimes. So clearly, it works, but we just have to make the system work better for us as we go. But fortunately, today's lecture is taped, so at least you have my comments and we can certainly access them. I will send you a link tomorrow on all this material. So if anyone has any question, you can raise your hand so I know you are trying to ask a question and type it. If not, then we will have Father Joe and Bosco indicate when we will meet again in a couple of 3-4 weeks. Whenever I know Father Joe is traveling a lot lately, so we'll have to give him some time to do other things. Bosco, if you can hear me, shall we call it a day, or do you have anyone has any questions?
Bosco है ना?
Yes. 38. Okay.
Father, we heard you.
There is no slide 38 here. You mean it's only up to 23. Okay. Looks like a number of groups were able to participate, but some had some internet problems. But at least you can send them the link so they can see the lecture on internet later on. Alchemy of relationships. Yes, yes, of course. There we are. I think this was talking about the four different types of relationships between the doctor and the patient and between individuals, mother and child, for example. Not this slide. Okay, which one were you talking about then, Bosco? Or, you mean this one? Yes, this one or next one? Which one? Not this. No, okay. So you mean this one, yes? No? Okay, go ahead. Right, what?
No.
No. Alchemy. Oh, this is the one on alchemy, yeah? Yes. Okay. Write down your question so I can explain. So, but these are the 4 levels of relationship, conscious to conscious. And then the doctor has a relationship with his own unconscious, understanding yourself. And hopefully the patient has some connection with their own unconscious through their dreams and synchronistic events. But generally, it is hopeful that the doctor as a therapist or a healer or addiction counselor has a deeper connection with their own unconscious, and the patient obviously has a problem because they don't have a very clear connection with their own unconscious. Our medical and psychiatric problems, our addiction, our depression, our relationship problems are directly proportional to the degree of disconnection between our ego and our soul, between our conscious and the unconscious. So more connected we are with our unconscious, less problems we have. So the goal of therapy, the goal of healing, the goal of sobriety is to help your patient established is number B, a deeper connection with your unconscious. Now, the only way you can do that is first to have a good connection and a read on your own unconscious, number B, and then go and attempt a number D, meaning make a connection with the unconscious of your patient by deciphering their dreams, their symptoms, their addiction, for example. If a patient has addiction, that means they are caught in the lower engagement with the spirit and not a deeper engagement with the spirit. So how to help them engage with their spirit in a deeper manner, for example? What are the patient's myth they have to live out? What is the nature, like we were talking about, unio mentalis, etc. So for a doctor to have a read on the unconscious of their patient and then take that insight and do two things. Take this back in your own psyche, number D, and then communicate this directly to the patient A, and also to help your patient become more aware of their own unconscious. So that are two ways in which you can improve your patient's connection with their unconscious, by getting a read of it yourself as their doctor, and then helping them understand their own unconscious and consciously giving them education, information, reading, prescriptions of certain practices, spiritual practices, healing practices, grounding practices, centering practices, yoga practices, whatever, to be consciously connected with their insights. But the most important relationship between two people, between a doctor and the patient, or a mother and a child, is the number C, which is the unconscious to unconscious connection. And that is what Jung calls the participatio mystique, meaning a unconscious knowledge of the unconscious of your patient. Both partners are unconscious. Even the doctor does not know why they know what they know about the patient. But that is the most precious insight. You feel it in your bones, you feel it in your heart, you feel it in your psyche, you feel it in your unconscious. When a patient comes to you and they say, I've been sober for 6 months now, doctor, I'm feeling great. But in your bones, you feel this patient is using alcohol or drugs. The patient tells you, oh, I love my wife, I'm very loyal. But in your bones, in your heart, you feel this patient is having an affair. Trust your intuition. Don't blame your patient. Just make note of that. That is participation mystique. You have an unconscious knowledge of the unconscious. And sometimes the patient may not be drinking, but they will be thinking of it. Or they may not be having an affair, they will be thinking about it. Or whatever. So you are able to predict it even before the patient acts on it. And that is the power of this participation mystique. And every therapist, every healer, every doctor, every psychotherapist must cultivate this art of C. This is what makes a mundane healer a great healer. When you start tuning in unconsciously to the unconscious of your patient. So I think this is a very important subject. There's a lot of research going on in this. Dr. Daniel Stern, he studied the mother-child infant relationship. Dr. Michael Fordham talks about this in his book on self and so forth. Bosco, you have raised your hand. Why don't you speak or type out your question? Can't hear you, so type it out. Yeah. You want to type out your question? Oh, okay, Dr. Hari, that's wonderful. Okay. So that covers that particular question. And anyone else has a question? Bye. Okay, wonderful. So thank you all. I appreciate your participation, and Bosco and I, in consultation with Father Joe, will set up our next meeting. And if we work out the audio system better, we can even have case discussions. So good morning, good night at my end, and thank you.